On the next slide, that the environmental review and assessment of a project usually occurs simultaneous or around the time of the preliminary engineering and schematic design. That is not a hard and fast rule, but that is typically when we do our environmental review. It's hand in hand with design, and that you do need that environmental clearance in order to progress your project to construction. And so how do we get environmental clearance? That is the $100 billion question. And the answer is, it depends. If you ask your environmental specialist, what will it take to clear my project? They will probably start in on a series of questions, the first of which usually is to determine what kind of funding your project has. That's going to determine the playbook that we're working from in order to get environmental clearance.
Okay, we know it's working.
Excellent. Also, you want to define your project, identify the study area and the action to help determine what potential resources or other issues you may encounter. Some level of technical analysis, whether that's desktop or more, may be needed in order to classify that project as a categorical exclusion or an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement. And so, and then public involvement is also key during this entire process. It is part of the environmental clearance process, and also review and approval by your lead agency. And so this next slide is not really meant for you to read. It's more just to illustrate that NEPA is a complex process with many steps and factors that must be considered. And while NEPA provides the basic framework for considering the potential environmental consequences of our projects, as I mentioned before, it's really the agency policy and guidance that provide more of that roadmap. And I know that the process can sometimes seem like a black box, but there are guidance and steps and processes that we follow that must be followed before we can get environmental clearance. And again, not to read the list, but this is just an illustration of all the different technical studies and reports that potentially could be generated for a project, depending on the location of the project, type of resources in the area, and what rules or playbook that we're working from. It's very common to have a team of specialists working to assess a variety of effects on resources and identifying ways to avoid or mitigate effects. And just, really want to emphasize that this NEPA process is really, it is important to consider your documentation and disclosure during this process. Documentation is key, both for transparency in the process and also in case, a decision is ever challenged, you want to make sure that you have all of your documentation in place that supports that decision making. And of course, that also involves the public and getting input, and making any changes to the project that may be needed based on that input. And then just want to leave you with a few things to consider when thinking about projects and obtaining that environmental clearance. The type of funding matters. This will determine the playbook that we're working from, again, to achieve that environmental clearance. Communication and collaboration are also key with the project team, but also with your planning partners. It sometimes takes a village to get a project to the finish line. Also, minimize and avoid impacts where possible. This will help keep your project on schedule. As I mentioned, some of the most critical path items are often those individual resource laws and that we take into consideration during the analysis. And also include environmental considerations in planning to help identify those issues early. I think some of the most successful projects I've been a part of have really done a good job and brought up environmental constraints and had stakeholder meetings and even public meetings very early on before we even got to NEPA. And then transferring all that information into NEPA is very helpful, can really help the process. So that's all I had today.
Thank you very much, Susan. I appreciate it. I thought that was a great overview when I heard it a month or so ago. And on this policy board, we talk so often about different environmental reviews. I thought that it would be a good primer for folks to hear. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And Tucker, I would assume on that list of studies, you probably have done every single one of those, right?
We have, yes.
Okay, so we'll go back now to item number 9, which is discussion on project funding activities.
Oh, thank you. So this item, we have a couple of project funding activities that are kind of going on right now. It's going to be a very busy fall and spring, and they're all kind of interrelated. So we really wanted to kind of brief the policy board on what's kind of coming down the pipe, what we're working on the back end, and a lot of this you're going to start seeing in the spring. One is a deferred project refunding process. We've been working through the summer actually, I'll just go ahead and go to the next slide. With the sponsors of the 4 remaining roadway deferred projects. We have 2 from the city of Austin. This is West Runberg Lane as well as Lakeline Boulevard. And then Travis County has Pierce Lane and Breaker Lane North. And these are the last remaining deferred projects from the May 2020 action as it relates to Category 7 or Surface Transportation Block Grant funding. So right now, I'll go through the schedule briefly. I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but we kicked this off kind of in the middle of the summer. And the sponsors submitted materials by September 1st of this year. And right now we're going through a technical review of all the materials that they've submitted. And those materials are related to project readiness, and NEPA is one of those activities. But when they were deferred, all these projects were deferred with construction funding. And so we're working on the assumption that the sponsors are moving forward in the project development milestones, including right-of-way purchasing, NEPA clearance, preliminary engineering, and things like that. So they've submitted these materials, and we're reviewing those to see when we can potentially schedule those projects in the future. So the technical review is going on right now. I'm meeting with TxDOT and our GEC next week to go through the results of that review, and then we're also going to be meeting with the project sponsors to go through the materials as well. And so that item is going to be coming back early next year. So we plan on having a recommendation developed for this body to take action on sometime next year. And then depending on the outcomes of those actions, we'll be including those in the next iteration of the Transportation Improvement Program, which runs from fiscal year 2025 to 2028. So there's that.
Ryan, before we leave that, on the list of projects, the 4 that you had listed, I know there's at least 1 and maybe 2 others that the local government went and started work on it ahead of time. And I continue to bring this up because I think, what were the two?
I know New Hope was one.
I know there was one in Cedar Park, but then there was another one, I believe.
I believe Hays County had one as well.
Hays County. And we don't want to penalize those local governments for being proactive and moving forward. And so in this discussion, we need to figure out as a board how to make sure that, and I think the Cedar Park project was somewhere at $10, $12 million range. And I think the Hays County project was a little bit less than that. But we need to make sure that as a board, we make those entities whole. And I'm not sure how to do that, but that we figure that out, because moving forward is always a good thing. So.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really good point. We can make sure that's wrapped into that presentation, because we do have that full list of where projects went after they were deferred. And like you said, some move forward with local funding, and what actions y'all take on that. Another consideration also is we're going to be looking at inflation and the new costs of these projects, these 4 in particular, and seeing what those look like. And that's going to be something I think the board's going to need to consider as well. So I would just put that in the back of your mind as well.
So definitely before we add an inflation factor to those, the other people need to be made whole.
Yeah, so that's definitely going to be part of the recommendation, or the consideration for y'all to make a decision on. So that's a really good point. So thank you.
Is there a total list of projects that, like you're saying, there's 2 more than here?
So I think I developed one last month where it's got a current status of all projects that were deferred in 2020 and where they ended up, because we've refunded most of them, and then there's a few that went ahead with their own steam and own sources of funding. So we can provide that after the board meeting for sure. I've got that ready to go.
Okay, thanks.
And Madam Chair, it's my fault that didn't show up. I forgot to tell him again.
Okay, so the second item is we're moving to a new project tracking system called My Projects. We're working with our GEC and RPS on a new cloud-based system that's going to go live. Actually, it is October now. So this month, we're going to be holding training sessions with our project sponsors who have active current projects. This platform is a custom kind of cloud-based project management software, and it's going to provide a lot of information for the board to make decisions and really give you that holistic view of the progress of the region when it comes to the projects that you funded. So it's going to provide those progress reports, those quarterly reports are going to be done in there. It's also going to allow project sponsors, if they wish, they can manage their entire project out of this system if they want to. But crucially, and I'm going to show it on the next page, it's going to have dashboard views. And so the one on the right, this is just an example of what it's going to look like, but the project dashboard is really what I'm going to pull up during the quarterly progress reporting, because this gives you that bird's eye view of exactly where our projects are in the region, which ones are moving forward, and I think crucially it's also going to allow us to see which ones are at risk of falling behind, because that's part of kind of the next discussion and the next item is that we have to make sure that we're utilizing our Surface Transportation Block Grant funding. As I'll talk about in the next item, there's a new rule change going through the state right now that's going to really make it just that much more important that we move forward with the projects we have. So we really have to stay on top of projects moving forward. And this tool is really going to help us do that. But it's going to take a lot of buy-in, and from our sponsors who are actually going to be using it. They're going to have password protected profiles, and you get in, and it's going to track those milestones. The screenshots on the left kind of show kind of the innards of the program and what the sponsors and your staff are going to be seeing, and it's basically going to show exactly where everything is. You can include all kind of information, dates, everything you need will be included in here. And I'm going to encourage everyone to actually actively manage their products out of this because it's that effective depending on what system you may have. So we're really excited about that, but again, we're going to train the sponsors on that later this month, and then we're actually going to build out this system. It's going to include the TIP eventually, and likely our next project call will be run through this system as well. So just things to be mindful of. This will be something that we'll see in the future, and I'll do a more thorough presentation, but I did just want to bring that up.
So on that screenshot there, Ryan, I know some of the entities have other software tools that they use to track and manage their projects. And I just want to be mindful that we're not creating more work for them to get it into this if there's an interface or something where it can be uploaded from other systems. But I can't envision TxDOT changing off their system and starting to use this one, nor Williamson County and probably some others. So I just want to be mindful that we're not creating another level of reporting that we could somehow mechanize.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We don't want to, that's actually one of the main reasons why we kick this off, because the current reporting system is pretty archaic. So this will be much easier. And then again, if you have your own system for reporting, we can actually, they can just pull that information in, or I can. So that'll be pretty seamless, I think, and won't create any redundancies. And then for those smaller governments that don't have any system in place, they can use this if they want to. And one other thing is we're also looking to incorporate the Federal Management Information System, which is basically our bank account that we have with the federal government, and where all the obligations happen and where the true money, where you see the money moving around. We're looking to integrate this directly with FEMA's, and so we'll be able to see exactly how much money has been spent, how much we have at any given time when we pull this up. So that's the thing I'm most excited about, because that's a difficult system to use, and so this will make that a lot easier. So at any given time.
This will help us track all the money under the seat cushions and stuff like that?
Exactly. So anytime money's being, because this money's being moved around constantly, and code changes and everything, we'll be able to see that immediately. So I'm very excited about it. It's going to make my life a lot easier.
So you'll stop using the spreadsheets and Excel sheets you use right now? Okay.
That's the hope.
Good to know.
Yeah. And then finally, I want to talk about kind of the future funding opportunities. The two items I just talked about kind of relate to the next project call we want to do. The refunding of the deferred projects and the other projects that move forward, local funding, those decisions will impact how much funding we have available in a future project call. But our intent is to do a project call next year, and depending, it'll probably be a couple $100 million depending on the actions related to the deferred projects. And then also, we do have a couple of currently funded projects that are not demonstrating progress at this time. I'm going to be working with those project sponsors over the next couple of months to see if we can come to some kind of resolution with those, but those may be part of the conversation come next year. So I just want to bring those up as well. Availability of ready projects, I just want to take an opportunity to say how important it is for projects to be ready for the project call. This is related again to that funding utilization. It takes a lot to get a project ready for construction funding, and they're really cracking down on the funding availability, on funding utilization, so we need to make sure we're very mindful of that and investing in projects being ready. And then there is potential funding availability from other sources. I don't know, that's a kind of an ongoing discussion we're having, both with TxDOT and, there are a lot of funds out there, federal funds related to the IIJA, the Infrastructure Investments and Jobs Act. So making sure that there's a lot of funding out there available. So we'll be doing some project workshops in the next year, kind of similar to what WTS did a couple of weeks ago, but it'll probably be a couple of day workshop that we're going to do, hopefully with TxDOT, to kind of go through the project development process and help get projects ready. And finally, I'll talk about it in the next presentation, but the statewide administrative code changes that I mentioned earlier will also kind of have an impact on what we're looking to do for going forward. So I know that's a lot of information, but just want to kind of prep y'all for what's going to be coming down the pipe next year. So that's it.
Okay, that concludes number 9. We will go on to item number 10, which is Ryan again on Category 7 funding.
Okay. Thank you. So that rule change that I was relating to, wanted to present on that. So TxDOT is proposing revisions to their Texas Administrative Code, and this is regarding utilization rates to help optimize the use of federal funds by MPOs. So the long and short of it is essentially they're going to be looking at how much STBG funding, as well as we don't receive CMAQ, but CMAQ funding is going to be under the microscope as well, looking at how much you're carrying over from year to year.
To clarify, CMAQ funding is for those areas that have fallen out of attainment.
Yes, yeah, so it's congestion mitigation and air quality funding. And so there, across the state, there's a large amount of funding that's not being utilized currently, and I think that's kind of the genesis of this administrative code change. And essentially what will happen is if you don't have a plan for rolling over that funding, because in some cases you do have to save up for very large projects. In the case of 35, we had to save up 4 years worth of funding to be able to do that. But if you don't have a plan in place for that funding, they're going to be looking at transferring that funding basically from Cat 2 to Cat 11 safety funds. So it's just really a mechanism to encourage people to utilize their funding. But again, there are some large funding amounts kind of outstanding right now that are not being utilized. So I do want to point out CAMPO currently, over the 4-year period, we have a 99.2% utilization rate for federal funding. So this rule change really isn't going to impact us currently in the short or midterm. But I do want to point out we need to be, this really comes back to readiness, because we're going to be programming projects in the next project call, from 2027 outwards. So we need to be making sure that the projects that we do select are ready and can move forward at that time. So that really just emphasizes that. But it does provide additional flexibility for TxDOT regarding funding distribution, and there is potentially opportunity, I think, back to readiness. If we have a bunch of projects that are ready and there is funding sitting around the state that isn't being utilized, there may be a case to be made for that money to come to the region. So I think that's just something to be mindful of.
Isn't by definition, since our utilization rate's so high, that we do have a reputation for being project ready when the funds come about?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. We've got some large, 35 is a big piece of that because it's using a majority of the funds in those years, but the other ones have been moving forward too. So, and that just, again, emphasizes that readiness. So,
over the years, we've improved in terms of holding recipients accountable to getting those projects done faster. And I think as a board, we've talked about it, have policies around it that use it or lose it. And we'll start enforcing that, because what we don't want is to fall from the numbers where we have been and be someplace where money would be perhaps taken away from here.
yeah.
And Madam Chair, the CAMPO board is the only board in the state that has a reasonable progress policy.
Okay, sorry, keep going, Ray.
Oh, that's it, actually. So if you have
Okay.
any questions, please
So
let me know.
before we open it up, Madam Chair, let's go back to the first slide. I just want to provide some clarifying remarks. So on the Category 7 Surface Transportation Block Grant category, and that's one of the categories that this board receives and allocates, the proposed code change that TxDOT administration is walking through right now says that if our amount of surface transportation block grant funding hits 200%, then any amount that's over that 200% would be taken out of the Category 2 money, which is state money, and moved to Category 11, which is safety, but it stays in the district where it happened. So it's not lost to the district, but it is moved. So the reason they aren't moving Category 7 is because they can't. That money comes directly to this body by formula from U.S. Department of Transportation, and so they can't move that funding. But Category 2 is state, and that goes straight to TxDOT. They can move that money. So alternately, on congestion mitigation air quality money, which we don't receive, and I hope we don't receive anytime soon, what they're going to do there is if a region's amount hits over 200% there, they're going to first look at moving the amount that's over the 200% to another region that is in non-attainment for air quality first. What I asked when the presentation was made to us was for TxDOT to consider not just giving that to another non-attainment region, but also considering regions that are in attainment today but near non-attainment. And what TxDOT's immediate response was, well, send us something in and make a business case. So Ryan and I are going to pull that together and send that in. The reason I'm asking for that is, one, I think there could be opportunities if there's congestion mitigation air quality funding that's not being spent, that we could use it on something eligible for that in our region that may help us stay in attainment in the long term. So I think we can make the business case. What TxDOT administration said to us at the time was they want to make sure that we could show the emissions reductions. We can do that. Today we've got that in place, both through the consultants and through other means, so we can show emissions reductions by projects if that came through. So we're going to write that up and turn that in to TxDOT before the commission takes any action and sends that on for administrative code change.
So Ashby, that's what I was about to ask you. Where are we in the promulgation process? Or maybe I should ask Tucker regarding that rule.
We're early days.
Okay.
They just presented it to the commission for the first time last week.
Okay, so we still have an opportunity to help shape
Yes.
it as opposed to the comment section side?
Yes.
Okay.
And as Ryan said, right now we're first in the state in terms of utilization rate, and a lot of that is due to I-35. But even in the midterm, we're in good shape. And then I think now even in the long term, we're in good shape because we've got our sort of partnership with the district going on the quarters work that this board authorized. So we have things that we're getting ready to go. We should not see a lag in our STBG Category 7 utilization. We should be eligible for other people's money.
Put bluntly.
Put bluntly.
There's a question over here, Councilman.
Thank you. I appreciate Ashby being strategic about that, and I think we've had conversations over the years about, we're not in non-attainment, but how do we keep it that way? And those investments could be really helpful in preventing reaching non-attainment. So I love that idea as a approach, and I think it's really important for our area. I wanted to ask if you could do a follow-up for the board relative to this rule, since there's been a distinction that some of our being on top of things may have to do with I-35. We did put in rules in place and try to make things so that people would have incentives for spending the money on projects, and that's the goal. But with I-35 in there, it's a little bit hard to see how that's working. So if you can run those numbers for us with I-35 taken out so that we can have a sense of how we're doing on that measurement, that would be great.
Okay. I think, okay. I think we can do that pretty easy. Okay.
Okay, great, thank you.
Questions? Councilmember.
I'll also say I appreciate your foresight on that 200%. Can you tell me more of the timeline? You said we were early in the phase of the information being presented to the commission. How long do you expect until that letter is submitted, and do we need to identify other projects we could use that additional money on beforehand or not?
So, and I need to go back and find the TxDOT had a slide that had a timeline in it, and I'll go back and find the whole slide deck, and we'll send that out to the board members. My recollection was that it would be sometime towards April, May of next year before they would actually see an approval.
I really appreciate that, because I've had a lot of conversations in some of the committee meetings that I'm on about the EPA changing their air quality standards, and we could end up falling out of attainment simply by them adjusting that number down. And we're also having a lot of conversations, locally and regionally about, where are our carbon and mobile emissions reductions planning efforts, and making sure everyone is talking to each other. I know we've been able to talk about that in the past couple of meetings, but I really do think there's some opportunities here to really champion the folks that are interested in mode shift, and that will in and of itself alleviate congestion. So I'm really interested in that conversation, and would love to know more about it. Maybe we can just talk offline over the next couple of weeks.
Okay. And Councilmember Alter, I have not forgotten that you asked me to pull together some information for you on air quality. I have been working on it, but everything I find is not good enough. So I'm going to a couple of national experts on it, and I talked to one last week. And so I am pulling that together, and that relates directly to what Councilmember Ellis is asking about. So I'm going to pull all that together and I'm going to send it to everybody.
Other questions on this topic? You finished, Ryan? Okay. All right. Thanks. Item number 11. Yarav, you're up. Discussion on our TDM program implementation.
Actually, this is Ryan's item too. He just really wanted to.
He's got punt. I saw that punt happen.
Just to let everybody know, so we've had questions from board members in the past about, what the TDM program is and what we're supposed to do with it. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about where we are, where we came from, and where we're going. For those who don't know, this whole process started with the project call in 2017, 2018. At the end of that call, there was about $498,000 in Category 7 funding that had not been obligated, and there was a discussion within the board about what to do with that funding. One of the ideas was to use it on transportation demand management, and so what CAMPO did is we created a transportation management plan for the region, and that was adopted by the board in September 2019. In March, y'all provided us some TDCs for the local match, and then subsequently a TDM subcommittee of the TAC was created to oversee TDM activities for the region. What happened then is that we procured a consultant, and then spent the next, God knows, a long time basically gathering data, talking to board members, TAC members, other interested stakeholders in the region, mostly because TDM changed drastically due to the pandemic, and just to identify how the changes really affected travel in the region. Some of the stuff that we identified was that, yes, people can work from home, but there's a lot of folks who can't, and how can TDM work for them? One of the strategies, and I'm sorry, so what we did is we created with the subcommittee and our consultants was the 7 strategies they see on the bottom left of the screen. One of them is called school pool, which is kind of self-explanatory, is that parents within a school can find carpool partners for that specific school, and we thought it would be great to help alleviate bus driver shortages, pickup and drop-off times at school. So that kind of kicked off earlier this year with the Basis Pflugerville campus, and within a 2-week period, There was about 125 families that signed up. There's only about 400 students that go to that school, so a fairly sizable percentage of the families signed up. And right now, we're just working on trying to, nurture the program, grow it, and make sure that we don't lose any momentum. So that's where we are. That's how we got here. Where we're going is that in March or in April, the board allocated $4 million in CRP, or Carbon Reduction Program funding, to CAMPO to expand on the work that we're doing with the TDM program. Right now, we are in discussions with TxDOT to amend the existing AFA that we have with them. Once that gets amended, we're going to initiate the procurement process to identify a consultant to carry on with the expansion of the TDM program. And then in January, once that consultant starts, we will fully implement the regional TDM program. Just to carve out, the subcommittee that is part of the TAG is responsible for guiding the program. They're the ones who try to make sure that the implementation of the program meets the goals and objectives as identified by both the CAMPO staff, the regional TDM program, and any new strategies that we've put together. The consultant is the one who actually implements the strategies, while CAMPO staff just provides coordination, consultation, and direction. And I believe, yes, that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nirav. I know there had been some questions in the past about roles and responsibilities, so I think that helps really clarify that, and I appreciate it. And the carpool deal, that's a huge response. That's pretty exciting.
Yes, even our consultants who conduct this program in other parts of the country were also very impressed with the response rate. It is unusual. So one of the things that we cannot see due to privacy concerns to make sure that the program is safe and respects privacy is how many people are actually signing up. That requires doing the physical outreach stuff, like going to the school and doing surveys and things like that. But 120, like half the school signing up is a pretty good sign.
I'm sorry.
What, are you just saying that 120 some odd families signed up, half the school, as you mentioned, but we don't really know how many are actually carpooling?
Exactly. There is not within the Community Solutions platform where School Pool operates, you are able to log rides and whatnot, but it's one of the privacy features that the vendor had set up, is you cannot see who is matching with who. To do that, you have to do follow-up outreach, such as going to the school, doing some surveys, talking to people, things like that.
Nirav, didn't we work with Del Valley as well?
We initiated discussions with Del Valley, but it has it just stalled, essentially. We've initiated discussions with Hayes CISD and also Austin ISD.
If you going into the full implementation next year, do you anticipate, or is it one of the roles for the consultant to work with the various school districts in the region, or who will help expand that?
The consultants are doing the major actual on-the-ground work. CAMPO staff will also supplement that, and yeah, they'll be doing like the emails, the phone calls, the meetings. That's going to be mostly done by them.
But I think any policy board member could help be boots on the grounds with one of those schools or school districts because the consultant only is going to know so many people, but if you have contacts and want to help facilitate that.
We would greatly appreciate anybody arranging any introductions, yes.
So I've got to say a couple of things about this report. First of all, I read this while seeing C.J. Stroud play well for the Texans. It drove me nuts as a Cowboys fan. So I may be a little salty in some of my comments on that stuff. But
yeah, your team knows.
but in all seriousness, the report is robust, and if you haven't read it yet, I highly encourage you to. I mean, it's a pretty good report. I do have some questions. One was around school pool, because I remembered exactly about Del Valley. That was the first thing that popped in my mind, because I remember us having a robust conversation about that. So if you need some help there, I'm sure some of us will be more than willing to go and help with that, to do that, because that's a great response where you go from there. And based on some of the results you have here, particularly when you're talking about low-income populations and the discernment over there, the surveys were interesting. I mean, I was surprised to see how many folks who make $60,000 or more were reporting no problems going to work or reaching work. Because, I mean, to be blunt with you, I mean, part of our whole impact when we're looking at, public transit and working for that is to help make sure those populations are taken care of. At the same time, I saw that when you're talking about essential workers in there and mentioned that there may be some, I'm not quite sure how you all put it, political apprehensions or something like that to go over from that. I think that what's interesting is that we started this way before COVID happened. So we've been on the front end about this as well. And if I've seen anything from this policy board, is that there's even more robust interest in trying to make sure that those folks and getting these things implemented from there. The congested corridor, Palmer. Talk to me more about that. I want to get more of an understanding about how that was designed, some of the things that have come from that, because I thought it was very interesting, particularly with a lot of things that are happening, across Palmer, across our different, regional representations, that you would pick that corridor and some of the things you came from that result.
So the corridor program was designed to match the corridor program that this policy board said that they wanted to start doing the design work on. And the idea was that TDM should be incorporated into the design process instead of as an add-on feature. We started with Palmer because I think that was one of the first that we were starting with the corridor program. So, it's just one of those things you want to make sure that, we're actually, as CAMPO staff, working with each other and not at odds with each other. That's also making sure that our consultants are also talking to each other. So that's kind of the story on that. In terms of progress on it, it has not been as robust as we want, partly because we're running low on the 498 that we're awarded, and we're still waiting for that amendment to kick in.
I do appreciate you actually working with movability too on these things. So that was an excellent aspect of it as well. Is there something, I mean, we heard about the school pool, construction mitigation. I think we've talked about that all at times, especially with what's about to happen to I-35. Is there something that you can see us helping with that? Because I think that's an excellent way to get ahead of that stuff, because we know all too well we're going to hear a lot of complaints from a lot of folks once we actually go ahead and actually, turning dirt on these projects.
So one of the things I think would be helpful, and there is a construction partnership program that TxDOT Austin District, City of Austin, Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, CAMPO, and some other, Cap Metro, have also been sort of forming. And one of the things that I think would be helpful is, as elected officials, when you put out your newsletters or other sort of information, that you could include some of the options that we'll have on there for commuting or for detours in those items. That will help get the message out to folks, because quite frankly, they listen to y'all more than they listen to us. And so, yeah, they do. So that would be helpful, and we can funnel that information to you as that information is coming forward.
All right, Councilman.
Thank you. I'm excited that we're keeping this moving forward and putting resources behind it. For the school pool, I just want to mention that one of the challenges we have in schools near me is there's this sort of, you don't get a bus unless you're 2 miles more away. And for many families, that creates a lot of challenges. And so I don't know, if there's, I think that may be an AISD role, but it creates areas where this is really an opportunity. And I just wanted to offer that I can connect you up with some folks if you're not already connected with AISD or with the PTA presidents and advocacy groups as well, who I think would be very interested to be able to have some technology that could help them to facilitate something that many of them really would love to see implemented to help the families out. with that?
Yes, ma'am. That's, multiple school districts have told us that that's the sweet spot for them, is that 2-mile radius where kids live too close to qualify for a bus ride. So yeah, that is definitely a low-hanging fruit for us. And yes, I would absolutely appreciate introductions to the folks that you know.
Okay, if you can send me your contact info, then I can, and, little blurb, I'll be happy to do those introductions.
867-5309 is his number. But no,
That's not mine.
Aren't old enough to know that reference.
but no, you're completely on right. I mean, that's exactly right. And it's a frustrating point we hear over and over again from our constituents about that. And I guess it's the standard for school districts or dynamics or policy making with that as well. One question I forgot to ask, your timeline. I found it very interesting. How flexible is it? Is it truly malleable, or are y'all married to what you have in paper right here?
No, it's flexible.
Okay.
Why, you have something in mind, sir?
I always have something in mind, but I just was wondering, it was interesting to see about that.
That's a scary opening question.
Again, as with everything, the timeline is related to funding and how quickly we can get that done. So we are working as hard as we can, but we do not. There are things we control and things we do not control. So.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Nirav. Appreciate it. Item number 12, we've already done. Item number 13.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a couple of items. There was a town hall meeting on FM 1431 that was put together by Commissioner Howard that Doyce and Chad attended, and Commissioner Howard was nice enough to bring Doyce flowers for coming and speaking at the event. So, and Commissioner Howard or Doyce, y'all are welcome to talk a little bit more about that if you want to.
Well, I'll just add that I think the community was very grateful to have, experts in the room presenting information. TxDOT was there, John Peters was there, I'm going to blank on her name, a woman that's in charge of the safety program.
Brenda Guerra.
Yes, and, we had first responders there, the mayors were there. It was just, everybody is so interested in how do we improve the safety in the region. And so we just appreciate the time that people put into the meeting. And I don't know, we probably had 150 people there. It was an auditorium full. And for the most part, they were grateful for the information. They did say they expected to hear the plan, so we're going to have to work on the plan.
Then the National MPO Association meeting was last week in Cleveland. We had a good meeting. I was up for re-election and was re-elected for another one-year term. I ran unopposed, so I was glad to hear I won. Then I think that's it for this one, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, Ashby. We've got item number 14. Just as a reminder, the next TAC meeting is October 16th, and the next CAMPO Policy Board meeting is on November the 13th. So thank you all for attending. And just as a reminder, the slide deck comes out Thursday or Friday before the meeting. And for those who weren't here, the slides that Susan went through on environmental process are in that slide deck. Thank you all for attending. We stand adjourned at 3:02.
And OU still